Hello everybody, this is Gregory with 5-Minute Catholic Apologetics and Living, where 5 minutes of your time and get you to the divine. Today we're going to talk about the true enemy of Christianity, part 1. Now before we begin, let's start with a prayer. In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritui Sancti, Amen. Gloria et Patri et Filio et Spiritui Sancto, secutor principio et nunc et semper, et seculi seculorum. Amen. I have to do this video in my office because my kids are about to wake up and I don't want to wake them up. All right, so this is going to be a very unpolitically correct episode, but I don't care. So who's the true enemy of Christianity historically? Islam. Now, before we all get our panties in a roll, so to speak, hear me out. And one of the kind of the genesis of doing this video is I just get tired of two gigantic tropes that the Marxist high school teachers and certainly the Marxist history professors in the university system teach about the Crusades and the Inquisition. So I thought based on that, I wanted to teach and have an episode about Islam. Now I want to be clear. I'm not saying that the typical Muslim person in the world is an evil person. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is we look at the philosophy, we look at the theology, and you can find over 100 verses in the Quran that talk about what we're supposed to do, the infidel, and how Islam is ultimately a religion of conversion by force. And if you look at historically when Islam came about, Muhammad, this is late 500s, early 600s AD, infidels, non-Muslims, whether they be Hindus or whatever, Christians, had three choices. And the three choices were convert, not convert and work under tribute, right? Be taxed or become a slave sometimes, like the Janissaries, or die. And if you compare that and juxtapose that with Christianity, even though of course certain Christian leaders weren't the best, especially maybe in the New World, the message of Jesus Christ is nothing like that. The message of Jesus Christ is all about humility, love of neighbor, and whatnot. But either way, so let's go to the Crusades. So there's this idea in the Crusades that the Crusades were some Western European imperialistic expansion into the Holy Land to kill a bunch of Muslims and to take gold. There was nothing like that at all. So what was it before? So if you look around the time of Muhammad, the Eastern Mediterranean was Christian. This is the Byzantine Empire. This is still when Christianity was Christendom. It had not bifurcated out into Orthodoxy and Catholicism. So the whole church was Catholic at the time under the submission of the Bishop of Rome, the authority of the Bishop of Rome. But if you look at Asia Minor, you look at the Holy Land, look at Egypt, this was still Eastern Christianity. Then Islam came about, and it was really, a lot of it was just a good timing because the Byzantines were fighting the Sassanid Empire, the Persians, for quite some time during this time. And it was a moment of weakness in both of the empires, and that's how one of the reasons why Muhammad was able to round up this force and then go in and take advantage of this weakness. And so what did they do? In the 600s, they took over the Persian Empire, and that became Muslim, and then they swept into the Holy Land in the 600s AD, swept through North Africa. Think of Augustine of Hippo and all those great Christians of the early church fathers. That was wiped out. They went all the way to Spain, which we'll talk about in part 2. And eventually they went into Asia Minor, and eventually they went into Eastern Europe during the Ottoman period, and they spread. So at the time, and this is something that's not really discussed, but anytime a Muslim conqueror, whether it be Saladin or Suleiman or Mehmet II or whoever it is, they go and desecrate churches. At the least they close them down, at the most they desecrate churches. And so for those 300 years, there was an uneasy peace between the Christians that remained in the Holy Land and the Muslims that had moved in, because part of it is they considered Jerusalem to be a holy city because they believed that's where Muhammad was taken up into heaven. And then what happened was in the 1000s, the Seljuk Turks came in. They were Muslim. They converted to Islam. And the Seljuk Turks were very militant. And they came in and they attacked the Byzantine Empire. And they won some very large battles in the second part of the 11th century. And so Alexis Comnenus, the emperor at the time, beseeched out to the Western Catholic kingdoms. Again, this is right after the schism, but reached out to the Christian kingdoms and asked for help. And I think people in the West forget how the Byzantine Empire, and we have an episode here on the Byzantine Empire, and we have an episode here on the Crusades and the Inquisition, which will be in part 2, how the Byzantine Empire served as a bulwark. So if you look at the beginning of the Byzantine Empire, when the Western Roman Empire fell, Western Europe wasn't, just barbaric, just Cretans. And then by the time the Byzantine Empire falls 1,000 years later, Western Europe is essentially in the Renaissance. Italy's in the Renaissance, and we're at the beginning of the modern period. So that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the Byzantines, who were absorbing all these attacks from the Persians first, the Arabs, the Bulgars, and all these people, and so forth. So the Pope, Urban, called the First Crusade. And the First Crusade's job was to go in and liberate the Holy Land and to stop these atrocities that Muslim leaders were doing to Christian pilgrims and to the desecration of the churches. It was a defensive thing. Now, there were several crusades after that. The Fourth Crusade was the most heinous because that's where we sacked Constantinople, we, the Latin West. So certainly, as with all things, with humans, there's going to be good and bad. There's going to be the wheats and the weeds. But if you look at the Crusades' intention, the intention was to liberate the Holy Land and to establish Christian kingdoms there to protect pilgrims from going to the Holy Land, not being raped and thrown into slavery. And I think that this is largely forgotten. Now, so for about 200 years, there were Christian kingdoms to various effects in the Holy Land. And around 1291, the last Christian kingdom was kicked out of the Holy Land. And again, the Holy Land was Muslim, and it's essentially been Muslim aside from the state of Israel since then. And then what you had later on was the advent of the Ottoman Turks, which really started in the 1300s in Asia Minor, and then they got bigger and bigger, and they pushed toward Europe and eventually took Constantinople in 1453. And it's interesting because, as you guys know, I was in Istanbul not that long ago, and unlike Rome, that has remnants of pretty much every century of history going back to ancient Rome, Roman history, Constantinople, I mean, it is thoroughly Muslim. It's like, sure, you have some of the basilican cisterns. You have the Hagia Sophia, which of course was a Christian church. They didn't destroy that. There's a few churches that remained prior to 1453, but they went in and raised that puppy. There's very little remnant of Byzantine Constantinople around, very little. So they came in, Mehmet II conquered Constantinople, so the Byzantine Empire finally fell. And I mean, that arguably started when Constantine moved the capital of the Roman Empire over in the 330s, so 1100 years. And so the Ottoman Empire grew. You have Suleiman the Magnificent, who's probably the biggest, most famous Muslim leader, of Turk leader, I should say, Sultan. And then they spread into Eastern Europe, and they got all the way to Vienna. And that's what we're going to talk about in part 2. And so during this time, you have to understand that Islam, and again, this is no attack on the common Islamic person, but to the core of Islam is jihad. It's the conversion or conquering or taking of the infidel. That is the core message, and that message has not changed. You can still see it in Boko Haram. You can still see it in ISIS. Recently, in Nigeria, since 2000, the year 2000, there's been 62,000 Christian martyrs in Nigeria. So wherever you go and you see on the map where there's a clash of civilizations, where there's conflict, it's never Christian versus Buddhist. It's Muslim versus fill in the blank, because their whole ethos, and again, it doesn't mean they're not good people, it doesn't mean they don't give alms and all these things like that, but to the core message of Islam is conquer, is conversion by force. And we know, like, within their own religion, conversion away from Islam is anathema and can be punishable. It can be punishable. You can't even bring a Bible into Saudi Arabia as a Westerner. They don't even allow it. So we'll talk about part 2, which deals more with the Spanish version of this, which is another big kind of black legend on the Spanish Inquisition. But guys, post in the comments. I'd like to hear from you. What's your take on Islam? If you agree or disagree. Until next time, take care. God bless and pray.